want to talk on one of my favorite subjects. If you have your Bible with you, could you turn to 1 Kings chapter 6? I should probably turn there. I told you to turn there, and I didn't turn there. 1 Kings chapter 6. Just want to read a few verses from Solomon building his temple. Starting in verse 1, it says, "In the 480th year after the Israelites had come out of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, the 2nd month, he began to build the temple of the Lord. The temple that King Solomon built for the Lord was 60 cubits long, 20 wide, and 30 high. The portico at the front of the main hall of the temple extended the width of the temple, that is 20 cubits, and projected 10 cubits from the front of the temple." Look at skip over to 19. It says, "He prepared the inner sanctuary within the temple to set the ark of the covenant of the Lord there. The inner sanctuary was 20 cubits long, 20 wide, and 20 high. He overlaid the inside with pure gold, and he also overlaid the altar of cedar. Solomon covered the inside of the temple with pure gold, and he extended gold chains across the front of the inner sanctuary, which was overlaid with gold. So he overlaid the whole interior with gold. He also overlaid with gold the altar that belonged to the inner sanctuary." I just wanted to read a portion of that. I want to talk today. I love talking about relationship with God and what it means to us and how we relate to God and how that interaction actually happens. It can be different from a human interaction and a human relationship that we have. We're talking about God who is spirit, but the connection that we actually have with God and the deep relationship that He has actually called us into. You know, last week on Easter, we talked about God as Father, and not just a type of father that we dislike, but I mean when the Bible says Abba Father, the kind of father that you snuggle up with and you call daddy. And He gives us these pictures because these are the types of relationships that He's called us into, these deep sort of relationships. In another place, Ephesians 5, actually, Paul starts talking about husbands and wives, and he goes on this discourse about husbands and wives, and then he says, I'm actually talking about Christ and His church. And so God gives us these two pictures of the strongest relationships that you can have as a human being. He gives us these two examples as relationships that He wants to have with us. Between a husband and wife is He and the church, and us as His children and Him as Abba Father. A loving Father, unconditional love, a Father, a perfect Father. He uses the two strongest relationships that we could possibly relate to communicate the type of relationship that He wants to have with us, the deep kind of relationship. And so I read this account of the temple because the Lord started speaking to me a couple weeks ago just about the temple and the structure of the temple. And I read to you the three portions of the temple that have the portico or the porch. It has the main hall or the holy place. And then it has the inner sanctuary or the most holy place. Sorry, I got to giggle for a second because I love how they named this. Hey, here's the holy place, but this is the most holy place, right? Oh man, it's so good. And then of course you've got the outer courts that are not part of the actual temple building itself, but that surround the temple itself. So what I want to do today is I want to just look at some imagery of our journey into relationship and the journey that can be seen in relationship heading through these rooms towards the main goal, heading towards the most holy place where God has called us to have relationship. The layout really gives us this picture of the journey that we all participate in. And I want to make sure, as we go through this, It's kind of stages or steps that represent it. But I want to make sure, I'm going to stop for a moment on each and just talk about how we can get stuck sometimes in each level and sit down before we've actually reached our final destination. So, to put out a disclaimer, first and foremost, we are a new covenant church, and this is an old covenant example. And so the reality of all things from last week being Easter especially is that the veil's already been torn. And it was torn from top to bottom, not bottom to top. It wasn't something that we did to reach up to God. It was something that He did to reach down to us. He tore it from top to bottom. We all have access to the most holy place as new covenant believers. And so I want to keep that in mind, but still use imagery because, Jesus was so phenomenal at giving us pictures, at using agriculture, at talking about parables, and just really putting handles on what it was He was trying to communicate so that we could actually step into the experience of what it was that He was saying. That's so good. Jesus is such a good teacher. Okay, so the cross of Jesus has brought believers into union with God, right? The veil's been torn. We've been brought into the most holy place. However, we don't always participate in the depths of the relationship that is available to us. What's real, what's been made available is done. The finished work is the finished work. Jesus worked, it's finished, it is done. However, we have the honor of participating in the fullness of it. And I want to make sure that we're not selling ourselves short in the participation of what He has brought us into. Your marriage certificate doesn't determine the quality of your marriage. The quality of your marriage isn't already decided simply because you are married. It takes participation on both counts to have a quality of relationship. All right, let's start in the outer courts. So go on a journey with me, if you can picture this. Step into the outer courts. The outer courts, there's lots of people around. And of course, the first or initial reaction when you step into the outer courts is you see the temple, right? You see it. It's there in the middle. It's this visual picture of, I've got a destination. I've got a place to go. And everybody would have known how the temple was formed, how it was built, and everybody would know that there is a place in that temple called the most holy place, and that's the destination. That's where the presence of God is. Everybody would know that's what we've been called to, that's what we've been born for, that's what we're heading towards, and as new covenant believers, that's what we've been brought into. But you step into the outer courts, and there's this anticipation of I can see the temple. A vision is there. God has given us so many pictures that He is alive, that He is well. God has given us so much vision and such a tangible manifestation of who He is that, we've got this picture, we've got this vision. He's as deep calls unto deep. You know it on the inside that God has called you into this relationship. Panchu knew that God was calling him into this relationship, right? He knew it on the inside. God was drawing him. You step into the outer courts, you can see the temple. The outer courts, they're full of people. And the reality is that some people that choose to stay in the outer courts instead of continuing the journey is that, they join the church for maybe another social club. There's people here, there's people, and they make human connections. And instead of stepping onto the porch and then into the main hall and then into the most holy place, they think, I'm just going to live in the outer courts because I like people. I love having relationship with people. I like hanging out with people, right? We're telling jokes, we're telling stories, we're sharing life, and that is extremely important, but it isn't the high call. It isn't the primary call. First and foremost, we are here today because of Him. We have an audience of one. That relationship is primary over every other relationship. But if you place community and human relationships above that relationship, then whenever human relationships go sideways, which they never do, whenever they go sideways, then your faith goes sideways, or your connection to the church goes sideways. And so primarily there's got to be this thing in you that's like, I've been made for the most holy place. It's what I've been born for. I have to get there. And you know what? I'm going to come back to the outer courts and hang out with the people and build community, because that's so important to live as a body and to walk together. I'm not diminishing that, but it's what is primary that's important. So that's the outer courts. You know that there's something greater on the inside that you were born to participate in. Our primary connection to the church is healthiest when we are first and foremost present to experience God's presence and then move around in community. So the next level, the next step is the porch. And this was actually a covered area on the temple, but it was still outside. So it'd be like sitting on your front porch. Picture something you might want to do this afternoon. Sit on your front porch with some lemonade and enjoy the incredible weather. So the porch, we get this picture of, it's the entrance. This is the start. Here is the door, the access on the way in. And so, you have to get to the porch before you can get past it to get into the next levels. I don't know if you know, but the temple is in I read it in verse 1 or 2 there, is in actually a rectangular shape. And it actually sits east to west. And it says that the porch is on the east side. And it's a really incredible illustration because, God works with days, he works with years. Israel, 40 years. Jesus was in the wilderness 40 days. He loves timing and talks about, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in his wings. Loves days and timing and all that sort of stuff. It's interesting that the porch was on the east side because that's where the sun rises. And it's almost like, here's the beginning of your journey. A new day is dawning for you, right? A newness of life is about to come upon you. This is the beginning, the beginning of the day. It's the beginning of your journey, and you're on the porch. However, those that live on the porch are those that also haven't fully stepped inside. Some people like the porch. It's covered, it's nice, you can see everything that's going on outside, but sometimes there are people, they've got 1 foot outside and 1 foot inside, and there's a hesitation. Should I go in? What happens if I go in? What if I actually open up my heart to God on a deeper level and give him everything? What if I kind of like it out here? I kind of see things. What if I step in on this deeper level? See, the other thing about the porch is that there's a clear view of the outside world. Sometimes you've got to let go of the outside and step fully into the inside. Having your feet in both places doesn't always work. Maybe people on the porch feel like they can't leave the outside world to explore the inside world. They can't cut connections with what is happening outside to fully commit to what's happening on the inside. The porch also, and this is the last point on the porch is a place in which you feel covered, but you're still outside of the intimacy. It's a place where there's a covering. You think about when it starts to rain, you run under the porch because there's shelter. So you feel the effects of the house. You feel the effects of the temple. It's the taste and see that the Lord is good, and you start nudging your way in, and the temple is actually blessing you. It's covering you. You're starting to feel these things. But you haven't made the decision to actually step inside to the deeper level of intimacy. It's this incredible imagery and picture of this journey that we're on with the Lord, that we've been on, that people are on. It's part of this journey. We don't want to get stuck on the porch, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. We want to step into the deep levels that God has called us to. So the next step is the holy place. Now you're inside the temple. You're in the main hall. You're in the larger room that is in the temple. And even though it's the outer room, it is filled with things that represent what is in the most holy place. So you've got the table with the bread of the presence, and you've got the candles, and you've got the altar of incense, and you've got these, it's really important, you've got these symbols that God has given us so that we have a pathway to relationship with Him. But if you stop at the symbols and never actually engage in the relationship with him, if you play around in the symbols, then all you have is religion. It's not okay to let the symbols become gods in and of themselves. It's not okay to let these representations of relationship take the place of actual relationship. This room is the main room of religious services, and those who stay here enjoy the structure of religion but shy away from the intimacy of his presence. Spoke a couple months ago from the book of Timothy, that verse that says, a form of godliness but denies its power. And I was thinking about that for a second. A form of godliness but denying its power. And I believe that that word deny there isn't a lack of faith. It's not a not believing. It's actually, I better read it and make sure I read it right. To deny the power doesn't mean to not believe. To deny the power means to refuse its access to your life. If someone brings me a gift, I can deny that gift. I know it's true because I can see it. I know it's real. It's not that I don't believe in the gift. It's that I'm denying to accept it. It's that I'm refusing it. We don't want to get stuck in the main hall where we have the form of godliness, but we're constantly saying no to God. We're constantly resisting his presence. We're constantly resisting him coming, experiencing him on a deeper level where we're actually saying no. We want to step in and participate in the fullness of the relationship he's called us to. The finished work is the finished work. It's done. We have the honor and joy of working out our salvation, of living into it, of participating in the fullness of what God has brought us into. Don't stop at the wineskin when you can partake of the wine. And now we come to the most holy place, the inner sanctuary, or the Holy of Holies. And this room, we were talking about the east and west, this room is on the west side, which is an incredible explanation because that's where the sun sets. And it's like saying, this is the final destination. This is where you come to rest. This is the end of the day. This is the end of it all, to be in his presence on the west side where the sun sets. Our destiny and our purpose has always been to be in deep relationship with God. That's always been his call from day one when he created Adam. From day one, it was about walking with God in the garden. It was about being in his presence. It was about having that intimate relationship. And obviously in the garden, things broke and we started hiding from God and strange things started happening like that. But God's purpose was always that we would live in his presence. Last point this morning, and this is about the most holy place. If you read about it, it had no windows. It had no windows. It was dark other than the lights that were in there. It had no windows at all, and it was this incredible picture of focus. The only thing in there was the Ark of the Covenant. The only thing behind the veil was the Ark of the Covenant and the elements that were inside it. It's this idea of focus and purpose, that this is all you need, that really there's only one thing that matters. There's only one thing to look at. There's only one thing to focus on, and that's the presence. That's being with the Lord. That's our relationship with God. There were no distractions. There were no distractions like there were in the outer court. There were no distractions like there were on the porch when you could look out and still see the world and have one foot there and one foot here. There were no distractions where even in the religious services, you could do the acts without having the actual tangible relationship with God. You can only be aware of one thing because it's right there in your face. It's the presence of God. This is home. This is home for us. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes with me this morning?